People seem to forget, if you change today, today will change your life. So I am here with my sister, and she's currently complaining about a fly in her room. So where is he at the moment on Fly Watch?
He actually happens to have stopped buzzing, but I'll let you know if he comes back, or you might be able to hear if he comes back.
Okay.
That was quite an abrupt start.
Yeah,
I
well,
wasn't ready.
it's an abrupt start for a relevant.
I thought we were discussing how I was going to start. It was going to be a bit of like a funny bit.
Yeah, but we're not funny, so we can't really do a bit.
That's true.
And yeah, so you're
Oh,
quarantining.
it flies off again.
Oh,
It
okay.
flies off again. Can you hear? Is the sound okay?
Yeah, I think people probably wondering. My sister isn't crazy, but and I'm as exhilarating as this is like the Breaking Bad episode with the fly, which actually I actually quite enjoyed.
That was the worst episode. I believe they only made that episode because they ran out of some money during the writers' strike.
That is true, but I
Well,
think
no, they didn't run out of money. They ran out of writers. That's different.
Anyway, so you're quarantining with Tom and a fly. So
Yeah,
obviously
and
you're showing
Fancy.
more. You're showing and your cat as well. So you're showing a lot more concern for the fly than anything else. So,
Yeah, I don't actually know where Tom is or whether he's okay. He might have had a fall. Not sure.
okay. And how's the cat?
The cat brings me as you know, a lot of joy, but she also brings me a huge amount of anxiety because she's ever since we got her last August, and I say we got her, she actually got us. She turned up at our doorstep as a stray, as you know. That was for the listeners. Is that how you do it? I don't know.
This is just like a David
Do I have to
Attenborough
pretend?
episode with animals.
Do I have
Just
to
the
pretend? Oh,
flies, the
don't get me
cats.
started on David Attenborough.
Oh, okay.
Do you no, with David Attenborough, I honestly think it's just one massive episode of Punk'd. I do not believe half of the things that he's talking about.
You are not bad mouthing David Attenborough right now.
I think it may come out one day.
Say that you love David Attenborough first.
I do.
Right.
I
Okay.
do. He's a magician. He's an actual magician. I believe half of the stuff is made up. Anyway, we're not talking about that.
This has been a really
so she turned up at our door. Okay. She turned up at our doorstep, and we tried to look for her owner, and we couldn't. So we ended up taking her in, adopting her. Ever since then, she's had all sorts of issues, injuries, illnesses. For probably about £3,500 worth of vet bills by this point. But the last couple of days, she's been a bit poorly and down. We didn't know why, and then next thing we knew, she's right as rain again. So it's just a real roller coaster with her, and that I attribute my happiness levels to. I was thinking about this last night. What causes my mood to change? One is the sun, as we were discussing earlier, and the weather.
Yeah.
One is whether I have a big meeting coming up at work, and if I do, I tend to feel a bit low, just like wanting to get out of the way sometimes. If it's a bit of a stressful meeting. One is my own health, and one is the cat's health. So unfortunately, I've added another lever to my mood control board. So most of the time she's lovely, but she's just been a bit stressful recently.
Yeah, I think people do place a huge amount of importance on pets and stuff. But so talking of those levers and everything else, how on a sort of more serious note, how have you found the isolation, the quarantining in terms of your own well-being?
Well, I think my overriding feeling is just feeling very grateful because I, touch wood, have my health, and my friends and family have their health, and I am in a house that I like. I'm in an area that's safe. I'm with somebody in the house. We have the cat, and we have a garden, and that's something, before we moved last year, we were in a really awful situation with our flat and our neighbours. And our neighbour had 9 dogs, and there was criminal activity. And I just so thankful every day that I'm not still there,
Yeah.
living next door to a pretty scary situation. And so that sort of reminds me every day that I have a lot to be thankful for. But just I have a job that is secure, hopefully for now. So at any time, I mean, but that's on a deeper level. But I think day to day, like I was saying earlier, it is very up and down. I think for everybody, it does feel very intense. One day you can feel intensely happy because my work's a lot quieter, so I've got a lot more free time to do the things I love, like reading and cooking and sunbathing in the garden. And you can just have days that are really, really like brilliant and really memorable. And then you have days where maybe the sun's gone in and you have absolutely no energy because you've not moved for the last 5 days, and you haven't spoken to your friends and family very much, and you just suddenly feel very intensely low. And I think, but like I say, underpinning those feelings are this sort of gratitude that I do genuinely feel, which helps to pick me up again if I do get to a day where it's not going so well.
Yeah, and what the thing I find so weird or remarkable really is just how many ups and downs you can have in the day, right? So
Yeah,
it's just a lot of people, usually would talk in terms of days, and for me personally, I never feel like I have a bad day. I feel like I have bad moments, but I work really hard to make sure that they don't turn into bad days. But
you said that
even,
before. I really
yeah.
like that. I really like that attitude, and I have clearly forgotten it based on what I just said. But I
No,
do try and remember that.
well, it's it's just how it's just an interpretation, if nothing, not particularly different to anyone else necessarily. But actually, how many more times you have to work at that for it not to be a bad day as much as possible during
Yeah,
isolation, because within the space of hours you find yourself being quite happy, and then all of a sudden, because of
yeah,
mundane things to do, or as you said, I think the connection and entertainment, I think, are two really important things, and being sort of stimulated in some way,
yeah.
really important. And just
When
out,
you finish something on Netflix, that's another trigger for me. Suddenly
yes.
you're like, oh, I've got nothing. I have nothing to entertain me.
What have you just finished?
Um, I just finished Normal People, which
What,
isn't on Netflix.
what's that?
It's on. What's that? Mum said she's told you about it.
Yeah,
Mum says she recommended it to you.
not sure.
You don't listen, do you?
No.
So, not everybody's talking about it at the moment. I've just so it's based on a book by Sally Rooney, which I've just finished. I wanted to finally read it before the TV series came out. But it's on BBC Three, BBC iPlayer. It's a 10-part TV series, basically just chronicling the relationship between an Irish guy and girl from when they're about, I don't know, 16, 17, through to just after finishing university. And this very kind of intense friend slash romantic relationship and dynamic that they have, and the ups and downs, and what it means to be in any sort of dynamic with one other person. And it's just so,
Okay.
the book is brilliantly written. I'm obviously very late to the party saying that because it's been sold over 1 million copies, but the TV series was good in its own way. Often they don't live up to the book, do they? But it's good in its own way, and the music was beautiful, and is it still called cinematography if it's TV? I don't know, but it looked great.
TV-tography.
Cinematography, but it's just one of those things that stuck with me after I finished it 2 days ago, and I cried a lot in it.
You
But
watched Ozark?
no, still no.
Oh, you have to watch that. Oh, We should
Really?
just do a whole podcast episode on everything to watch and just give people as many options as
We should
possible.
pick one series to watch together that we haven't seen, and
Right.
then record a podcast after every episode to dissect it.
Okay.
Speaking of dissecting, have you listened to the Dissect podcast?
No.
It dissects albums, and right now they're doing Beyonce's Lemonade, which I'm sure interests you greatly.
Surely top of
But
my list. Yeah.
they've done Kendrick Lamar, and they've done Kanye West, and they've done some people that
So when
you
you
think
say dissect, like what are
you
they
like.
actually doing?
They break down the meaning behind the song. So they go episode by episode is one song on that album,
Mm-hmm.
and they break down the songs into musically how it was built, but also the meaning behind the song and the different layers of meaning. And um, yeah, it's just really
Okay.
fascinating.
Okay. So,
Okay.
okay. So, speaking of things that are fascinating or not, let's talking about your particular life. And yes, well, for people are listening, so they can't see what you're doing. But okay. So, do you know
I
how
was going,
podcasts work, right?
moi?
No. Okay.
Yeah.
So, how's the you're obviously doing your yoga training alongside working at Google at the moment. So how's the training going? So you ran your first yoga session recently. How many more have you
Yes.
done any more yet?
I have done 4 so
Mm-hmm.
far. I've got my 5th one tomorrow. I'm absolutely loving it. Um, I'm still doing my training. I don't finish my course until January next year,
Yeah.
hopefully, unless it's delayed because of COVID. But I'm at the point now where I have to start teaching to build up a bit of practice, and it's actually worked out. This silver lining, one of the silver linings of this whole COVID situation is that I can start teaching over Zoom. Well, it's not Zoom, it's Google Meet that I'm using. Because I work for Google, I should be shouting about Google
Yeah.
Meet.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same thing. But it's sort of teaching over video call sort of acts as a nice halfway house for me to not be thrown in at the deep end of, like, being in a room with 20 people all staring at me, and having to walk. You're literally walking in and around people's mats right there, and they also expect you to adjust them. So there's quite a lot of pressure on you as a teacher if you're there in the room. But over video call, there's an understanding that you obviously can't adjust them. You're It's a very different way of teaching, but it feels a bit less high pressure to do it that way. So I'm quite grateful that I've had this opportunity to build up slowly, teaching some friends over video call, and now I've got a group of about 8 or 9 on a Sunday morning.
Good.
And I could grow it faster, but I don't know, I'm a bit scared. I'm torn between just getting as many people involved as possible and kind of growing my brand, quotation marks, versus not overwhelming myself.
But if it's done by
And
video,
also,
how is it overload? I don't understand how it's overloading yourself.
well, I still try and engage with the people that are practicing. So everybody has
Oh,
their cameras
okay.
on, and I
Yeah.
position them so I can see everybody, and I give everybody,
Feedback.
I'll say, Hannah, actually turn your back foot out 45 degrees, because it makes you feel a bit more engaged in the class. And I've
Okay.
been in
Yeah.
classes recently over Zoom, yoga classes, where somebody's been teaching me, and I had my camera off because there were like 40 people on the call, and I didn't look my best. And then about halfway through, I was like, I can't be bothered,
Right. Yeah.
because they couldn't see me. I sort of just slowed down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I can do that.
So everybody, I like to call people out, and so that they stay engaged. And one of my yoga teachers actually recently said she would never have more than 10 people on the call, because in the Zoom class, because it's unsafe. You can't be teaching people safely if you can't see them all.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm in two minds at the moment, but I think 8's probably a good number for me to just keep going with for now.
I think, yeah, when I do gym classes, the gym I go to, they're all quite small anyway, and they are a lot better. I think there is a fine balance with them being too small. I have done a Pilates class with 2 people, Before.
Were you one of two or were you one of three?
One of three. On a separate occasion, I was told by the instructor, so it's two as in 1 2 me you. So it's up to you whether you want to do the class or
But
something or
that's
not.
great. I mean, that's personalized teaching.
Well, in the moment you don't feel like that, and so you sort of go rain check, and then just turn the other way and walk off. I actually felt really bad,
Cool.
but
What? Sorry, that was in person.
I was in person, so I had to say to their face, rain check.
Rain check.
But I said it like that, like
Catch you next time.
rain check, rain check.
Rain check.
So no, but I agree. I think if you do classes and things like that, whenever I have kind of like business meetings and things like that, or working with consultants and stuff, if there are lots of people and it's just like after a while you don't feel that you sort of don't feel the need to present your best, as in you being the person listening or watching. And then as the kind of a person instructing and everything else, you sort of are dealing with one person, and that does help in terms of everyone else's knowledge, and that's fine. But I think what you might find is when you do it live and in person, teaching one person doesn't have an effect on everyone else. On video, I think it's a very different experience where you work with one person. It doesn't have an effect on everyone else. So you may feel different when you do it live. But I don't get to do my Pilates class at the moment. So can I join your yoga class?
You can join my yoga class for sure. There's it's all girls so far. So having some I don't
male, remember? Males? Men.
male, boys.
Masculine. Were you going to say masculinity?
I was going to say masculinity, and then I was like,
oh my God.
But no, you're welcome to join.
Yes.
I think. How are you finding? Finding? I guess you've been doing your podcast over video call, like pre lockdown. But I'm hearing a lot from people about like just feeling super tired during this time, and then they're putting it down to the number of video calls that they're having, and speaking to family and friends. And I read an article, I think it was on the BBC as well recently, this whole Zoom fatigue thing,
right?
Where actually it takes, because you can sort of feel it. It takes a lot more to have a conversation with somebody over Zoom than it does if we were just talking together. It would feel a bit more. Even if we were recording a podcast, it would feel a little bit more relaxed. But you have to raise your voice a bit. You have to. There's always a slight delay, or something you've got to overcome, any technical, and also especially when it's more than 1-to-1. If you're in a group meeting, you can't see the reaction of people as you're talking, so that feels a bit like there's a sort of cognitive dissonance there. And I think that's, but I mean, speaking of me being grateful again, I am lucky in that I've worked in a job for 3 years where all of my 80% of my meetings are video call, because I work with people in other countries. So I also sort of feel like I've managed to be a bit more prepared, a bit more used to this way of communicating than a lot of other people. So I'm interested to hear how you found it.
I mean, if there is a fatigue similar to you, I've sort of got the endurance for it, because every day I'm speaking to people via Zoom. So I've kind of got that. I do understand the conversation is slightly jaded, slightly stilted, and a delay, and the fact that the sort of back and forth you might have in everyday face-to-face conversation you have to change that, because you have to give unbelievably significant amounts of time added onto when someone finishes talking to make sure the dialogue's clear. And I see it with I watch like lots of debate shows and things like that, whether it's in sport or other fields, and everyone is entertained by conflict, right? So everyone loves that conflict of arguing and talking over each other, and a lot of these shows can't do that at the moment, because you can't through on video and face to face, that live response, it's there and that's palpable. But via something like Zoom, it's really bloody annoying if people jump over each other. So you can't have, so actually those programs, the one thing that they rely on is no longer there. And actually I do quite a lot of work thinking about communication, and it's always about empathy or expectation, right? It's one of those two E's all of the time with most communication. And what I think people can sometimes get caught up in, to sort of to answer your question, is we watch a lot of communication at the sort of our reference points are TV programs, films, all of these sorts of things, in which they build what they do off conflict. They build what they do off the things that create entertainment. And we actually get trapped into thinking that's appropriate communication, or that's adequate communication, when that's not true. Actually, if you adopt that in real life, you're actually going to piss people off or get a punch in the face. So actually, we get taught communication techniques wrong all the time anyway. So yes, whilst Zoom is a different form of communication to how we might do generally, how we do it generally isn't necessarily right with everyone. We might have people in our life we do get it right with, but if you think about even the people closest to you, the impatience that you might have at certain points with them, and that's part of that is under what I'd call expectation. We have an expectation that they should talk like this. We have an expectation that they should respond like this, or that they should suggest this, or they should do more of it. And expectations in a lot of situations, whilst we do have to have some expectations, having too many is problematic. And for me, amongst all of this, is trying to understand how to be more empathetic and reduce my expectations. Not always easy to do. But the fatigue thing you mentioned, I think for most people day to day, they have two forms of communication. It's face-to-face or it's texting, and it's one or the other. And for a lot of
You
people,
mean during lockdown?
No, not during lockdown. I mean the rest of the time, as in you can go and see people face to face and everything else, or you can text them. But the one thing the phone is used to actually speak to someone on the phone is one of the least used functions anyway. And people outside of lockdown, how regularly do people do video calls outside of work? Not that often.
Not really.
So you have four things. You have texting. Sorry, I've forgotten what the four things are already. You have texting, speaking to someone on the phone, speaking to someone via video, and face-to-face. And what's helped a lot of my clients in terms of the feedback they've given me is because they just did the texting or face-to-face, the face-to-face dropped. A lot of them tried to carry on the texting thing, and then all of a sudden they're feeling tired and lacking energy. And it's because they don't have actual proper communication and connection with people. You can't get that through texting, really.
No.
And so what I've tried to get people.
What about the old-fashioned letter? You've missed
the
off the
old-fashioned letter, exactly. Carrier
Everybody's
pigeon.
there's some people I'm hearing are starting to write letters again, which I think is just lovely. But obviously, it's not that efficient to have a conversation.
No, but
hey, how are you? Good. Yeah, you. Yeah, good.
But weeks
5 weeks have gone by.
But to answer your question, is that the fatigue thing? I do get it, but a video conversation isn't the midway point between texting and seeing someone face to face. It's as close to face as you can possibly get. It's so much closer to that end of the spectrum that it's a significant enhancement on your well-being. And whilst there's a fatigue element, I do get it. But one, like anything, you build up the endurance and the stamina for it.
Exactly.
And two,
you do. And I'm not saying at all. I'm not saying at all it's the wrong thing to be doing. I think it's fabulous that we have this. Like, it's saved so many people's sanity, I'm sure, including mine. But it's just something else people are having to get used to, isn't it? It's really accelerated the rate of adoption for video conferencing and video calling and face to face over digital face to face. So it will be, I imagine, will be a fantastic thing in the long run.
How has it affected your perception in terms of with your yoga? So a lot of businesses, you get all these personal trainers, for example, who you'll have the big percentage that will have their own online business as well, and they can just carry on just fine, and loads who didn't have that set up and now are in a scramble. How has it changed your perception of how you might do your yoga going forward, regardless of the lockdown or not? Has it changed your perception?
I don't know. I think it's a tricky one. I've always been quite digital. I'm a millennial. We're all pretty digital savvy. And I think I've always, growing up with Dad, who was somebody that was an earlier adopter of computers and the internet, I think me more so than you I've been interested in tech since I was quite little. And I remember I just used to make posters with PowerPoint all the time when I was like 7. But I really love the idea, and obviously I work at Google now. I just love the idea of tech being helpful to our lives, and that's at the forefront of everything that Google does. It's like they pay me to say this. This idea of helpfulness is the thread that runs through every single product Google makes, every single initiative, all of the work Google does, and all of its employees is grounded in helpfulness, because tech fundamentally can be really, really helpful to our lives. I mean, obviously, video calling as an example of that during quarantine. So I've always had the idea that whatever I do with yoga, I like to kind of think about how I can integrate elements of tech into that. Yeah. Whether I'd really thought it through that much before all of this, I don't know. But there are a lot of yogis out there that hold this really kind of natural, pure idea of what yoga is, and you don't have any music, and it's very to me it feels restrictive. To them it doesn't at all, and each to their own. But I love practicing with music, and I would prioritize people having access to yoga over the idea that it always has to be face to face. And if that means you're doing it over a video call, and you're somebody's able to practice yoga with a teacher, otherwise they wouldn't, then I would say always go with a video call. There will be a lot of people out there, a lot of yoga teachers that would have said they never. In fact, I saw an Instagram post the other day from the owner of a yoga studio, who was kind of saying, yoga with Adriene, who's a yoga YouTuber, very, very big yoga YouTuber. She got a lot of stick for doing that, because they said, well, that's not yoga. That's not what yoga is. You're not teaching anybody, you're talking to a camera. And this owner of this yoga studio had said, I heard about yoga with Adriene, and at the time I thought, what we're doing, we'll never venture into that world. That's a completely separate thing. And now look at me, she's now running all of her classes over Zoom, able to sustain her and her family financially, and all of the teachers on their roster. And actually, she's a teacher that I've got her book somewhere here. I've always wanted to practice with her, but she was too far away, so I never could. And now I have, because I have her over Zoom. And so it's opened up this accessibility idea. It's just meant yoga has become so much more accessible in a lot of ways to people. So I think that's a long way of me saying I would never turn down the idea of integrating the digital world into my offering, because I just think it opens the door to yoga, where a lot of other yoga teachers might, to me, run their practice, their teaching in quite a restrictive way. So, I'm still very new to all of this, and I'm sure very naive in the yoga world, but that's how I feel currently, and I think this lockdown's really solidified that for me.
And well, I know for a long time you, quite different to me, that I've always had a thing which, whether it's a slightly addictive personality or slightly obsessive or whatever, in terms of I always had something like a thing to really drive myself towards, and felt very passionate about. And I know for a long time you were you're obviously, especially in terms of where you've got to with Google as well, you worked in marketing for a long time, and something you found yourself to be good at, but maybe something it wasn't, back in the day, it wasn't something that you knew whether it was your long-term passion or not.
No one dreams about working in media planning.
So, but since you've got into your yoga and the way you talk about it and the passion that you exude from it, you've sort of clearly found something that you feel quite. The way I sort of
Mm.
put it is it's when someone finds something that they're passionate about, that they're quite aligned to it. And so
Yeah.
how how did you fall into it, or come, stumble across it, and how did you realize that this was something that actually I really wanted to do, to the point where you go, what it takes to make this work, I'll spend the time to do it, because it takes a lot of time, doesn't it? It's taking a lot of your time to prepare
Yeah.
yourself and learn all the stuff. So how, at what point did you realize it was something you wanted to do, and how was it trying to find that thing, if indeed you were trying to find it?
Mm. Oh, I totally was trying to find it, but ever since I can remember, I've really felt that um, I didn't have that one thing that I wanted to throw my everything I had into in the way that you did. I think maybe it was in contrast to you that I felt it more acutely, because you always threw yourself into one thing, whereas I had lots of different things I was interested in, but never had the patience to stick any of them out for long enough. I'd like dip in and out of things. Um, but that really frustrated me about myself, but you can't force it, can you?
No, no.
If you're not passionate about it and you don't have the patience for it, then that's not your thing. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I sort of just thought, oh, well, I'm not going to find one thing. I'm sort of just going to keep going as I am, dipping in and out of bits and pieces, but never really feel that passion, that true passion for something. I tell you what, though, if I could sing or dance,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know I would be. That would my thing
Same,
would be musicals
same.
or performing in some way. I feel so much passion for it, but I have no skills. So, um, so yeah, I think I started. I honestly couldn't tell you with yoga how it came about. I'd been to the odd class here and there over the years. Probably my first class was when I was about 23. So not that I wasn't that young. It's not like it's been um a long, well, yeah, it's actually quite a long time, isn't it? I'm quite old, but 7 years. But it was very, very slow going at the beginning, and I'd go to the old class, and I didn't fall in love with it straight away. I just thought, okay, yeah, that's cool. And then maybe 6 months would go by, and I'd try another one. And I just, it was just a really gradual thing. I guess what it reminds me of is like you find the one when you're not looking for it.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah,
And it's,
yeah.
you know, I I wasn't putting any pressure on it, but I just noticed I kept wanting to go back to yoga classes, and particularly like I mentioned yoga with Adrian, just having the access to do it more and more through YouTube, and she would have 30-day challenges, not challenges, but 30-day practices. And it just meant I went back to it, and you notice that you're improving a little bit, and you start to learn what the names are, and you just feel like I think the more you feel like you know something, the more you're interested in it. So I started to be able to talk about it more with people that went to yoga. I started to know what the different Sanskrit terms were, and then you become a bit more interested. And then you something happens in a class, and you think, oh, I don't really understand that. I'm going to look it up when I get home, and it was really gradual. And um, after a few years, I still felt very new on my journey of practicing yoga, but I wanted to really. I'm somebody that, in a really annoying way, likes to understand the detail of everything, and quite. Um, I'm not very big picture. I really like to understand the theory of stuff. So I think that the teacher training appealed to me on that front, because half of the people that go into teacher training don't actually end up teaching. They're just doing it for their own
All
understanding.
right,
And
okay.
so, they teach you how to teach in some of the modules, but a lot of the modules are just teaching you the theory behind yoga and the history and philosophy of yoga, the anatomy, and why different postures have different benefits for your mind and body.
Right.
Um, and but on top of that, I also really really loved teaching. Well, not that I'd done loads, but I really liked the training element of my marketing jobs whenever I've been training people. And over the years, it's just kind of something I knew that I enjoyed doing, helping people work through stuff. So it sort of made sense, but I was really scared to go into it because I just thought I'll be the worst person there because I'm quite new to it. I'm relatively new. A couple, like 3-4 years in is relatively new. But actually, what's been amazing is that everybody on my course has different ability levels, different ages, different body shapes, and it just really showed me that it's a part of my personality and my character, I think, where I think it really matters that I'm exactly that I'm good enough for something before I'll even try it.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a whole swathe of people that go, yeah, it'll probably be fine, and they'll just throw themselves into it anyway. And I think that that's something I learned. I probably could have not waited for so long till I felt till I felt like 100% confident to do it.
Yeah.
I could have done it. I could have started trying to do it when I was 50% confident, and so it helped me learn something about myself. But yeah, so I now only in the last sort of year have I realized that that has become my thing, and I didn't even know it was happening, but that's now the thing that I feel really passionate about. And so, 30 years down the line, I'm somebody that has a thing, whereas other people know that they have their thing from when they're little. And so it just goes to show, doesn't it? It can come at any time.
And what would you say to people who haven't found it, which is probably not a question that you've thought of, or a question that you'd even would consider thinking what you would suggest to someone else, but what would you say to someone else? Because one of the things that caught my attention then was, and it's another question I wanted to ask you about, well, what would you do next time when you're only 50% confident? So that I create models to help people build more clarity in terms of their confidence. And there's, the sort of getting the 50% confident, that sounds like maybe it was to do with clarity, being clear in terms of what good yoga looks like. But there's another 5 areas that affect our confidence levels that you can improve those levels and that make you take the next step. But to answer the first question, maybe there isn't an answer, but what would you say to someone said to you, oh, Catherine, I'm really struggling. I want to find that thing like you have yoga. How do I go about it? How long is it going to take me? What would you say?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think it can probably come at any point during your life. Some people are, I suppose, lucky enough to find it early on. Although if you do find it early on, does that mean you've cut yourself off from the other things that life has to offer? So it's not, I say lucky, but maybe there's positives and negatives to both. But I'm 30 now, and I've only just worked out what my thing is, and who knows, in 5 years' time, maybe it won't be my thing anymore. But at least I almost feel like I filled that that void that I had of that thing to really throw myself into, throw my time and energy into. And that's great. But maybe in 5 years' time it'll be something different. But at least now I know that I have the capacity to feel that way about stuff. I think, I guess the way that it came around for me was that I was just trying different things as they came along, and not putting too much pressure on it. I think you can't force yourself to feel passionate about anything. So opening up your mind, not being too laser focused on any one thing, and just letting rolling with it, I guess.
And I think something you said is very valid as well, which is that well, all of what you said is of course very valid. But,
how dare you? That's one thing.
There's one thing that sounded okay.
Gonna have to cut the rest.
Is that when you said now I know that I have the capacity to feel that way. I can feel that strongly about something that you found the yoga. And I think for a lot of people, just sometimes we can get caught up in anyone listening would have had moments or experiences whether felt really alive or really excited or really loved up or really happy or whatever, and maybe they're still looking for that the kind of the work version, or maybe in a different area of life, they're looking for that equivalent where they get that same feeling. But just to use those reference points to know that it is possible to get that feeling because you've had it before, but have that feeling in different places, in different contexts, and to have the belief that actually, having had that feeling before, that there will be other things that can also give me that feeling. I don't have to be totally reliant on one. And that's something I've had to work really hard at. Another very good point you made was the difference between me and you. And you said about, well, actually, if people find it early on, do they close themselves off to all of the things? I think for me in particular, I think that's a perfect analogy in terms of, I found that with football and with other things, it met all of
Pirates.
pirates. It met
Tarantulas.
tarantulas. What else? Thomas the Tank Engine.
This your whole kind of
Yeah,
coaching thing is an iteration of all of those kind of passion points that you've had over your time. But I think now you're better at not. This isn't your only thing, but you have maybe at first it probably was your first, but that could easily why you're able to be so knowledgeable about your field now is because you did put it's that whole 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell thing, isn't it? You do have to have a certain amount of laser focus on one thing, don't you? And that means sacrificing other areas. But at least you have had a life of lots of different obsessions rather than, you weren't like a child violinist that only spent their time playing the violin
no,
until the age of 30.
No, but I've had to learn how to understand that the feeling I get from coaching, of this feeling, there are other places where I can get this same feeling, if not greater. And I only learned that based off I genuinely mean this, off that piece of advice you gave me. Do you remember what that piece of advice was?
Probably. I gave you so much advice that's really like stellar. So it's
stellar.
Hard to
Which
pick out
one really kind of just stands out? I don't know. I remember I was working really intensely on something, and this was quite early on with all of this stuff, and I'd got to a point where I had really like closed myself off for a little, quite a while. And I remember you saying to me, I was so intent on creating videos and creating this and creating that for all these other people that I didn't know. I remember you saying to me something along the lines of, you put so much energy and time into people you don't know. Where's that energy for the people that you do know? And you might not have said it quite as bluntly as that, and definitely.
No, I think I did.
Definitely paraphrasing, but that's always really stuck with me because I thought that's absolutely right. And I always use the analogy of kind of the oxygen mask of when on a plane they tell you to put your mask on before helping everyone else.
Yeah.
So that obviously makes sense for you as an individual. But what I started to realize is for the people, you have your different social circles, but for the people absolutely closest to you, your family and maybe some close friends, that's part of the oxygen mask as well, and your relationship with those people. And actually I realized that I'm only making myself more and more, let's call it unhealthy, less fit in some ways mentally, like in terms of physical fitness, if I didn't have the capacity to work on that aspect and have the energy for that. And I don't get it right all the time at all, but I realized that part is, there's more, there should be, and there is more there's more joy in that aspect of things than finding that one passion. And so I was always very grateful for you for saying that, because it was absolutely on the money. And I'd spent, like you just said, I'd spent most of my life in that headspace of, or if I do this thing really, really well, then people will like me and people want to be around me. And that's why I got into football. And I had to come off that. You're right. It's like you would never invest all your money in one investment. You'd be smart and you put it in a few different places, so that you don't lose everything at once. And so I always thought that was really good advice. And I've always admired that you sort of have spread your energy in lots of different places. Maybe that in your eyes, that's why I didn't have that one thing. But I always thought, well, no, she's good at keeping up with this, or keeping in contact with these people, or working hard at this, or making sure this is taken care of, and you just seem to be more in control of more aspects of your life, really.
Well, I mean, look, I think it also comes down to just a general
And you're my
difference
older
in
sister, so why haven't
personality.
you taught me all this shit?
Just lead by example, you know.
Oh.
It comes down, I think you just naturally have quite I don't want to say obsessive, because that's a negative word, but you have, we are quite different in that area. You have more of an obsessive personality than me, and I have quite a short attention span for things. And so that naturally has led us to the different
other.
interests, and obviously be
Become
absolute
arch
enemies.
nemesis.
Now I know who your arch nemesis is.
No, we don't say that. I don't have Catherine, I'm a well-balanced individual. I don't have any arch nemesis.
If I ever have to bring that person up, and Tom's like, "Who are you talking about?" I'm like, "Remember that person that's David's arch nemesis?" And he's like, "Oh yeah."
For anyone listening, I don't have an arch nemesis. I'm incredibly...
No, you're too well balanced for that.
But yes, we hate him.
Him or her.
Him or her. Yeah. So.
But no, what were we talking about?
Oh,
yeah, we're enemies, different personality types. Yeah, I think, like I said, there's no right or wrong, is there? As long as all of life for me is about finding balance in things and doing what makes you and the people around you the happiest. And I think when I gave you that advice, I remember, to me, you didn't seem happy. And if you had seemed really happy at that point, this is years and years ago, if you had seemed happy, I wouldn't have felt the need to say anything. But I could, from what it seemed on the outside, it didn't seem you were, what you were doing was very happy, and you were putting so much pressure on yourself to create all these things, to get things right in order to help people, which is incredibly admirable. But like you say, it was to help people that you didn't know, and you had all this pressure to do that, and that was your entire world at that point. But it was at the expense of living in the present with the people that were actually there. And that's why I said it. Had you seemed really happy, I wouldn't have said it, because of course it's an admirable thing to be helping anybody. But yeah, so I'm glad that advice worked. Not worked,
definitely.
But stuck.
It gave me a lot more balance, and actually, the for a lot of the time, that intensity and that pressure, if all your needs are being met by one thing, it does ramp up the intensity of it. And so actually, knowing that if I'm not enjoying this part of my life or this aspect as much at the moment, I'll just go, I can my focus can go over here. Again, you do have your ups and downs all of the time, and like every other human being, it'll be the same for me and you. But now it's that case of, actually, I can find enjoyment over here and over here and over here, a bit more than I used to. And something you said there, which is exactly right, which is about being present. And I think for a lot of my time, my focus has always been a bit further ahead. And as I've got older and older, I've become a bit more present, and understood how to be more present. How do you find a way to be more present? I know it's easier if you're in a phase in your life where there is less anxiety or less pressure or things like that. When you have anxiety, pressure, stress, and all of these things, you'll be either looking at the past at when you didn't have that, or looking to the future going, oh, what do I have to do to get rid of this? What's it going to look like when I don't have this? So it's easier, anyone can be more present when they're enjoying themselves. But how do you stay a bit more present? Because I think I've realized that's an incredibly important tool of life in general. So how do you keep yourself quite present amongst everything else going on?
I don't. I'm actually from the future.
Oh, okay.
No, I really struggle with it. And I think while technology can be incredibly helpful for our mental health in many ways, that it connects us, for example, it also means that many of us aren't really living in the present a lot of the time. I'm thinking about when I'm scrolling through Instagram, I'm living through someone else's eyes and someone else's life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not present in my own environment and my own body. So there's that. Also, I'm a massive worrier, and so that means I'm constantly thinking about. So this morning, I remember I woke up this morning, and in my half asleep days, I was just going over and over something that I did yesterday, really insignificant thing, and going, oh God, I wonder if that was the right thing. Should I have done that, or have I done that right? Oh God, and you get yourself worked. I woke up and I snapped out of it. I realized, but that on some level is always going through my head about the past, and then you're also worrying about the future, a meeting that's coming up, I don't know, doing this podcast. I wasn't worried about this, but there's always something that you can get. Doesn't matter. There's always something we can worry yourself about. So I really do find it difficult, but I guess that's one thing that I get from yoga, is that it helps to settle the mind through movement of your body, tying it in with the breath and focusing it inwards. So I'd say more and more I'm using my breath in situations where you can't just roll out your mat in the middle of the office and start doing downward dog. Breathing on its own is yoga. That's an element of yoga, and I think when people think of yoga, they think of like somebody tangled in knots on a yoga mat, but there are so many other elements of yoga that are just guiding you on how to live your life outside of the physical practice.
Tell us what those are, because I think people who listen to this will want to know what those things are.
So there's something called the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and you can I won't talk you through the whole thing, but within that you've got what's called the Yamas and Nyamas, which are like, I guess in Christianity terms it would be like the Ten Commandments, but it's in yoga philosophy you've got this sort of guide to how to live your life, and they are one of the things. There's a whole host of other things, but that's just something that came to mind. I'm just trying to get the list up on my phone of what they are. 10 ways to bring yamas and niyamas into your practice. Here we go. Okay, so it's often illustrated as a tree with different branches, but it's things like aparigraha, which is avoid greediness, or asteya, don't steal, satya, tell the truth, ahimsa, practice non-violence. Some yogis take that to mean becoming vegan, because they see violence towards animals as part of that. Santosha, try and be content. Tapas, doing your best. I don't know if this is an accurate description of it, but anyway, this is just on Google. I haven't learned them off by heart yet, but that's just one area where the yoga philosophy guides you in life, or offers a guide to life.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was going to say is, breathing for me has become quite an important way of managing my my chattering mind. In yoga, it's called chittavritti. Chittavritti is like your mind chatter. Chittavritti is a Sanskrit word, and breathing helps to quiet that mind chatter. And I have one breath technique in particular that I go to time and time again if I'm feeling my stress levels rise, because it activates, this particular breathing technique activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest nervous system. It's the kind of the opposite to fight or flight.
Okay.
Which is your sympathetic nervous system. Your parasympathetic nervous system is where you want to be if you're trying to calm the body down. And it's called Ujjayi Breath, and you can Google it. Ujjayi.
Is that something you can sort of more physically take us through now, or you can at least describe?
So it's for some people, my instructions resonate quite quickly, and for others it takes a little bit longer. And if that's you, then I would suggest looking on YouTube or just reading up a bit about it more. But I couldn't tell you exactly why it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, other than it has something to do with your vagus nerve, which is the nerve that runs from your
That I know
head to
about.
your torso.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
so
so
when you
I
am I
think it's
right in thinking that when you breathe through your mouth, it activates the vagus nerve, because it's a bit like when you gasp, where you go like that, it sends a stress signal straight to the brain. That's why they tell you to breathe through your
yeah,
nose. Is that right? Part of
it's
it.
sort of. So there's lots of different ways to activate the vagus nerve. The one that seems to just work for me, and maybe it's to an extent it's placebo. The one that works for me is Ujjayi. It I think it has something to do with the vibrations of the larynx that come about when you do this. But it's actually a closed mouth breath. But the way that I teach people um, to practice it is to start off imagining that you're steaming up a mirror. So hold your hand up and imagine you're going against a mirror to steam up the glass.
Okay.
And it's that kind of quality of the breath. It's a sort of whispering sound. It's quite almost a constriction of your throat, but still very comfortable and very easy. And once you've done that a few times, try then, and this will sound strange at first, but try closing your mouth, but then finding that same quality of the exhale. So breathe in and then shut your mouth, and then, and you'll kind of hear it inside your head almost. It's that same quality as if you were steaming up a mirror, but with your mouth closed. And once that starts to become more comfortable and natural, you can then try and find that same resonance on the inhale breath as well. And all it is an inhale and an exhale, mouth closed, but with this sort of deeper throat sensation than normal. And you start to elongate your inhales and your exhales, and it's almost like you have a small hole at the front of your throat, as if you were breathing straight into your throat. So you don't feel the rush of air through the nose. It's not nasal breathing, even though you are breathing through your nose instead of your mouth. But the sensation is very much at the back of the mouth and the throat, and quite deep. And that you'll start to feel the vibrations in your throat, and that's what activates the vagus nerve, which in turn activates your parasympathetic nervous system. And we want to try and live in parasympathetic dominance over sympathetic dominance. We don't want to be in a constant state of fight or flight, because that's where our cortisol levels are really high, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you why that's bad long term for our bodies. But most of us, especially like the fast-paced nature of our lives and everything going on in the news right now, are living in this heightened state of stress, and that's not a fun place to be, from my own experience. So I find this really works for me, and I do it before meetings. I do it sitting at my desk, before bed, when I wake up in the morning, if I feel a bit anxious. And it's just something that I know now is a really easy win for me.
How does that? So that's really good, and I've just done that, and actually, I could feel quite a difference to other breathing techniques that I've learned or come across. I genuinely felt quite different by that, and the common things that people will hear, and I just want to for myself to understand the differences, because the things about the vagus nerve which I hear that aren't good, but then there are things which I've heard that make that it is a good thing to kind of activate. So from the things that I've kind of understood and learned, you have those typical breathing patterns of like breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out through your mouth for 8 seconds. And to do that, I want to understand the difference between something like that and what you've spoken about just then. And you mentioned about the sort of sort of sympathetic system there, but what's the difference between those two breathing techniques, if there is one? I don't know if there is, or if there is there a difference between the two?
In all honesty, I don't know. I think that the idea of the elongating the breath, that you were talking about, and also the holding of the breath, that's something that you can also do in the Ujjayi that I just spoke about, Ujjayi breath. The holding of the breath at the top and at the bottom for a few seconds also helps to just slow the breath down. And it's the slowing of the breath that I think has the most impact. However you get there, almost. So for me, I know that this sort of Ujjayi breath helps me to slow down my rate of breathing, and maybe that's because actually you're constricting your throat slightly, so, and you're breathing through your nose, so naturally you're pulling in the air slower than if you were gasping through your mouth. Mouth breathing is more associated with the sort of fight or flight response. Because you gasp for breath, and you're pulling air in a lot faster, which sometimes you need to, but the idea behind activating the parasympathetic nervous system is to slow the breath down. So I think if you're breathing in through the mouth, holding very mindfully, and then very mindfully exhaling, if you're breathing in through the nose, holding, and then very mindfully exhaling through the mouth, the exhaling through the mouth isn't activating your fight or flight response, because it's an exhale, not a gasp if you see what I mean.
I get.
So however you get there, I don't think it matters. Even if you did that same Ujjayi breath but exhale through your mouth, that's fine, but it's one more thing to think about. So I think, I don't know is the answer, but my guess is different things will work for different people, and you just have to find what works for you.
Oh, very interesting. And there's a line which is fear is physical, and a lot of people I work with, most people's natural instincts as well, is that if something's going on in their head, that they try and solve it in their head. And actually it's the hardest thing to try and, if all the ways you can go about it, it's the hardest thing to try and do. And changing your physiology is the quickest. And breathing is a huge part of that. And then you couple that up with various other types of incantations that you do, and you create a sort of a very powerful compounding effect that can shift someone's state of mind very quickly. But the breathing is a huge part, and so anyone listening, it's always better to change your physiology and create some sort of movement in the body, or change that blood flow. And that's why people, even people who eat too much or like to eat, or things like that, or even other forms of kind of addiction, stuff like that, is that it changes the blood flow in the stomach, and like with eating, for example. So it's changing the blood flow, that changes the biochemistry, so it changes how we think and feel. It's changing your physiology, and that's why that's a comforting thing. So
and so much of our mind is based in our gut and our stomach, and I think people don't really realize that as well. There's such a strong connection between our stomach and our brains.
And so and for on the yoga side, in terms of your physicality, in terms of your fitness level, in terms of your muscle tone and everything else, and I'd noticed in one of the previous occasions, well, you didn't I was actually going to give you a compliment.
There you go. Welcome to the gun show.
You trying to show me muscles is I like how you're trying to show muscles, and it's probably just pushing out more. Actually, no, I won't say it, but anyway.
Bingo wings.
But I had noticed previously that you in particular your arms and your shoulders, that you looked a lot stronger. In terms of your physical capability, how much of a difference has that made? Because I think some people, they have the perception of what yoga is, and for some people maybe it's like, get it's a bit of stretching, I get it, maybe it relaxes me, but it's only like everyone knows what yoga is intellectually, but people don't really understand what it is until you actually feel it, right? And you actually feel the shift and feel the change. So how's it affected you or benefited you from your physical ability?
I think I definitely feel a lot stronger. I definitely have, because I'm passionate about it, it's a form of exercise that I'm doing regularly that I wasn't doing before, so I'm generally all round a bit fitter. But that's actually, yoga is fantastic for a lot of things, but it's not sufficient to manage your cardiovascular fitness.
Right, yeah.
And actually some studies have shown that it's not actually good for weight loss, which a lot of people go to yoga for.
Sure.
So not that I wanted to lose weight, but I think it just shows that there's only so much that yoga can do for your body, it keeps a huge thing for me that has been, it's really stopped the headaches that I was getting a lot from my neck and my shoulders. Really, just it's the day-to-day maintenance part that I notice, where I feel more space in my joints. I feel more mobile. I generally feel a bit more in touch with there's this idea of body literacy, that you understand your body in particular. You know that I know that I have I have an imbalance in my hips, and I know that I have one ankle that's more inflexible than the other, and just knowing those things through yoga, improving my body literacy, has had such an impact on me, and managing when I have little aches and pains. I kind of now know why that is. I don't think I look that different. I maybe look a little bit stronger in my arms. It's my arms where I feel stronger, but really the biggest shift for me has been mental, and just having this one thing that I know that getting onto the mat, I can really reduce my anxiety levels, and on top of having something that I'm passionate about, it's just added another element. And I'm kind of bringing full circle. It's another lever that I've added to my life that I know I have control over, that can improve my happiness. So for me, I think it's more of a mental thing.
The lever analogy, is that something you came up with yourself?
Yeah,
I really like that. Genius.
I was thinking earlier, was it yesterday or today? I can't remember how I came to it, but I was sort of just listing out the things that affect my mood. I think because of the weather recently, I was thinking weather really has the impact. And then there's the cat. There's only really kind of 4 or 5 things that can have control over my mood in a big way, and the yoga thing is something I've added to that control panel, I suppose, that I can control myself. Whereas the health of my cat Fancy, I can't control. So there's some things where it's sort of helpful, I guess, to know what to let go of. But I only just labeled it the levers and the control panels at the start of this conversation. So feel free to take it on.
Yeah, I'm good. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about was, I know with work, and you found a good balance with your yoga and with your work as well, and that you had that you now have sort of Wednesdays off as well, and you've spoken previously about how much of a change in terms of your stress level or any feeling of anxiety, it really makes a difference to have that kind of break. And lots of people at the moment will be, if they're working from home, will be getting this feeling of how different it is to spend more time at home. Maybe they don't get a sort of the day off in between like you do in terms of your work week, but maybe on some particular day, because there's less work to do and stuff like that, they're not working as hard. They may be starting to recognize actually there's some benefits around not being in the office or being at the factory or being wherever every single day. And actually that bit of break is something that really helps to clear my mind. Maybe they have anxiety for a lot of different reasons at the moment, which would be understandable. But in some ways they might be recognizing actually there's a different way of life that might be more suited to me. And I just wanted to ask you, last thing really, is about how much of a added benefit, if it has that extra day had for you, and how would you, if it has had a benefit, would you advocate other people, if they're able to, if it is possible for them to do so, to find a way, maybe it's not a day off, but maybe find ways to carve out points in their week to create that space and that distance from work?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing I would say, to your point, if they're able to, you have to be very sensitive, careful, having these sorts of conversations with people, because of course I can sit here and go, oh yeah, like, taking Wednesday off, obviously it's fantastic, everybody should do it. And the reality is I am super lucky and privileged that I had a good start in life. I had a lot of support. I had financial support to go to university, and of course I worked really hard, but I'm in a position where I started from a place of privilege, so I have to recognize that. And before I say anything else,
Sure.
and of course there's plenty of people that just can't take the time off for other reasons. But for me personally, I got to a point I felt really burnt out from working in media agencies for a number of years, and I think some people thrive on that and really love the fast-paced nature of it, and I did at first love that, but the more senior I became, the more under pressure I felt. It really overwhelmed me, and I am somebody that is a bit of a control freak and perfectionist, so I was all constantly trying to do things to the very best standard, and having a client on your back watching you all the time, I just think it wasn't the right environment for me. And so it made me start thinking about, really, well, what do I want to do? And I didn't have that one thing I was passionate about, like I said. So I just started thinking about things, and I came to the conclusion that, why should we have to? Who says 5 days a week is the right thing to do? Maybe 6 days a week is better if you are in a job that you love. Maybe 2 days in one job, 3 days in another is better. And I can't remember when, but something clicked for me at some point where I just realized, well, who says we have to work in this format and this structure? So there was an element of that, and there was an element of, I really didn't like the role I was in at the time, and I decided to leave and go into, I planned to go into doing freelancing, where you have a bit more control over your schedule, and in freelancing you don't get paid holiday and sick leave, so naturally you get a bit more money. And so I thought, actually, maybe I had some friends that were doing it. I thought maybe with that I could afford to work a bit less and take a day off here and there, or work a different schedule, and just I think the issue was, I felt in my old job like I didn't have any control, and this would give me some control. Long story short, at the last minute I was offered a totally different role at Google, because I had already done some work with them and managed to kind of get in through the back door to some extent, because they knew me already. And because they knew that I'd been thinking about this freelancing thing, they were very open. They're quite progressive when it comes to flexible working, and they offered the 4-day thing. And because I was able to get a bit of a pay rise from one job to the other, I decided that it was possible for me to go down to 4 days a week. But I mean, I'm super lucky that is the case, and for a lot of people it just wouldn't make sense to do that, and it would add a whole other layer of financial stress to effectively be paid 80% of your salary. I work 80% of the official time. But the change that it has made to my general well-being has been incredible, and I made the decision to have the day off in the middle of the week, which means I have 2 days of work and then a day's break where I can focus on yoga, and then 2 days back at work, and then the weekend. And just having that variety of things, and not letting myself become overwhelmed over the course of day after day after day, 5 days, which for some people doesn't happen, but for me it does, has just been like so worthwhile. And I can't go on as many holidays or go out to restaurants as I could, but who can this year with the lockdown? But for me, the compromise, the sacrifice financially was worth the improvement to my mental well-being ultimately. So we'll see. We'll review it over the next years and see what happens. But for now, I'm really pleased that I've managed to find something that feels like it's right for me. It won't be right for everybody, but my one tip would be, think outside the box when it comes to the standard structure of our work. our ways of working. But I think companies are helping people to do that as well. Companies are becoming a bit more open-minded and making different rules around the workday and remote working as well. That will all change after COVID, so we'll see.
Absolutely. So how has this conversation been for you? Out of 10.
Well, I usually don't like talking about myself. You should be surprised to hear. But for some reason, you seem to have drawn it out of me. So, good interviewer, I suppose. Out of 10,
Yeah.
4.
Yes. So, and on that note, everyone, for any other of your interview needs, please see. No. So I hope everyone has enjoyed our conversation. It was nice to speak to my sister during this time, and her knowledge on stuff she spoke about.
Stuff. What was it? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Whatever.
And we will. Don't worry, we won't have her back in the future. So tune in next week for a better guest and more relevant stuff. But no, very nice to
love
speak
you.
with you. Love you too. Bye.